Inbound 737, runway 14, smoke in the cabin, 180 passengers, 11,000 pounds of fuel.
Emergency training is a vital component of critical response readiness. Drills are required for most personnel. Making these drills the best they can be is the challenge.
We're going to need a triage area.
They are complicated with lots of emergency personnel, equipment, and volunteers, and seemingly endless planning. This is the story of how a team in Indianapolis, Indiana, brought together a highly successful emergency training event on June 22nd, a collaboration between the Indianapolis Airport Fire Department and the Indianapolis VA Medical Center.
All of you that are victims or patients will be placed on buses and taken to the crash scene.
Well, a lot of these types of exercises take about a year or so to actually plan, which seems extraordinary, but they really do. There's lots of moving parts.
Okay. So we're running these two ambulances ragged.
Obviously, you have objectives. That's the first thing you do is you do a meeting where you do concepts and objectives. You basically come up with what it is you're trying to accomplish here. The airport is required, airport fire is required to do a full-scale exercise, meaning moving parts and pieces and resources every 3 years. They do a lot of other training as well, but this is one that's a full scale. They have to do this.
First, we have to start gathering the people who would be our mutual aid partners in an area. Fire departments, police departments, state police. We need to find the contact information for all the people that we need to work with. So we start developing those lists and inviting them to meetings.
The first thing we did was establish the objectives. Certainly one of our key objectives is to ensure that we're compliant with the FAA. But that being said, the real bottom line is, are we able to deal with an aircraft disaster at the airport?
Those objectives can be constrained by real-world limitations.
We also had to set out, if you will, a budget. How are we going to fund this event? So we reached out to our partners, and again, a huge partner for us in this whole event was the VA Medical Center.
Federal Coordinating Center, which is the VA Medical Center here in town, is mandated to have an exercise every 3 years with National Disaster Medical System hospitals. These hospitals have signed up to provide beds for patients in a disaster if it's federally declared by the President. I heard about the airport exercise and thought, since I had to have an exercise every 3 years and the airport had to have an exercise every 3 years, that perhaps we can piggyback together and join our forces and jointly sponsor a big exercise.
Partnering with other agencies can create a bigger operation budget, but it also poses challenges to make sure everyone's objectives are met.
Making sure that you include all of your partners when you're planning is really important. One of the things that, fire thinks about what fire thinks about, that's their job. They don't always think about what does the hospital need, or what does the EMS folks need, or what does the airport authority need to be able to, everyone has different objectives when you're doing an exercise.
We had to build a scenario that would meet the objectives that everybody wanted done. So we knew it had to be an aircraft accident to meet the airport's objectives. It had to involve so many patients to meet FAA requirements, involving so many patients to meet the VA medical system.
It was a little difficult because our objectives are a little different from the airport objectives. The objective that I was looking at specifically was patient tracking. When an FCC gets patients from other states or other areas, we are responsible to make sure that those patients are tracked throughout their stay from one state to another, from that state's reception center to the hospital they go to, and then back again. So it's extremely important that we know where these patients or victims are.
It was the same thing with all the avenues or all the objectives within the exercise, that you had to identify what it was you're trying to do, and then you had to figure out how you were going to do that.
We put together something called a meso, which is basically a script, and it helps to sort of line out what the next steps are, keep everybody in line, and figuring out what they're supposed to do. And then putting together some other things, not to make people fail, but to give them something that they have to challenge them a little bit.
Probably the next step was identifying where are we going to do this and how. We identified an area on the airport to do it, which would provide for maximum participation with minimal impact to the day-to-day operation of the airport. It had to provide for all the other facilities that we needed. For example, an area to do the registration, an area to do the moulage. We had to have an area that was large enough to park an airplane. We had to figure out where we're going to park all the volunteers.
We had to make sure that we had enough volunteer victims. We had to make sure that all their needs were going to be met. For example, things that you might not think about, bathroom facilities, paper supplies, how do they clean their hands? How are we going to keep them hydrated? The length of time that they were going to be there, they were certainly going to be hungry. How were we going to feed them? When? How was the food going to be kept cool? So there's hundreds of small details to tend to.
Initial planning meetings were monthly. In the 3 months leading up, they were weekly.
And then as we got into the last 30 days before the event, we were basically meeting pretty much every day about some aspect of the exercise.
We had counted up probably more than 70 meetings from last September up until the event actually took place. So in the last days before the exercise took place, we were having some days 3 and 4 meetings a day.
As the event date approached, a curveball came in the form of terrible weather. But planning and assertive action kept things on track.
We'd had lots of storms. We had some really serious concerns of were we going to get enough people to play these roles. The actual evening before the exercise took place, because of these concerns, we had a team of us at the airport fire department that sat down and started making telephone calls to everybody that said they would be interested in helping, just to remind them that, yes, we know it's hot out there. We know that the weather has been very questionable, but the exercise is going to go on. We would like you to still come on out and participate. I think that that turned out to be a really good thing to do, because we had approximately 100 people signed up, pre-registered, and we had over 140 show up.
It started out that morning storming, a large amount of rain. We were concerned it was going to delay us or move us indoors, which we really didn't want to do because we put so much effort into the outdoor setup.
With the drill scheduled to begin at 10, registration began at 7 with critical paperwork.
Background paperwork has to be done when we have these volunteer victims, especially when you're considering children. We did have some, under 18, and you have to be absolutely certain that they have parental permission. These people are our responsibility while they're helping us with this exercise, so we have to do everything we can to ensure that they're, again, safe and well taken care of.
Card there are your acting instructions. Rip that off and stick it in your pocket. That's your ticket to the Emmys. And then the final one should stay on your left wrist. Okay, that's going to tell the people what's wrong with you.
A lot of the victims came from, various locations. We had Boy Scout troops, and we had, folks that were volunteers at other agencies. We had people from the VA that were there. Lots of different people were coming in.
This guy is going to be blisters.
Yeah, you've got some bruised cheekbones here.
The other thing that was really, truly out of the box was the moulage, which means making people up to look whatever, to look dead, to look injured, broken arms, broken legs, bleeding wounds, lacerations, that type of thing.
After they were given an assignment of what their injuries were, and then they would move on to the moulage, and then they were given a safety briefing, there were meetings set up for that.
The safety briefing occurred, everybody got on the buses.
I think we got started on time with very little effort, because there's always something else going on. Actual real life gets involved a lot. We had rain the day before. We were worried about rain coming in, so we were watching the weather. We did have a contingency for that, so that was very good.
One of our key players was the city of Plainfield, which is very close to the airport. And as a result of the storms early that morning, they were unable to participate because of real-world emergencies happening in their community. The city of Indianapolis had some restrictions too. And as we watched the clock, we kicked it off exactly when our timeline said we would kick it.
Watch your step, going up. We're on schedule.
Ready to go?
We're ready to go.
In this situation, they were coming in on an airplane. The airplane was diverted because of smoke in the cabin. As it was landing, it crashed, and then you have the scene.
Attention airport units responding information. Tower called back. Pilot is advising smoke is getting worse. He is requesting an immediate landing.
Tower states 8 minutes to arrival. Aircraft touchdown is veered abruptly left. Appears we have fire.
One thing you have to understand is for a drill or an exercise, you don't see a lot of the rushing around that you might see at a real world incident. We're not trying to stress these people. We're not trying to overwork them. We certainly don't want to create any frustrations. So it may appear that we're not in a hurry, but one thing we actually practice on the scene of an incident like that is that none of our people should be running. Okay? We can't wear out our responders. We have to do our job, do it to the best of our ability, but we can't be running around everywhere because all that does is exhaust our crews.
An aircraft accident is even more significantly complex, I think, than a lot of things, just because you've got people that aren't necessarily from here. We want it to be as real as possible. So, having a large fire there, having people that are real actors that are running around screaming and those types of things does help to kind of amp that up. If you were using, just cardboard cutouts or mannequins, you're not going to get that same situation. You're also not going to get that interaction of people. And so much of what they're doing is planning for, and working how to manage the incident. And so, the idea is life safety is first. And if you don't have real lives that you're worried about, you're not going to be quite as energetic about it.
That's good right there. Stop right there.
Once the victims were taken off the plane, they were triaged on site. Red for critical, yellow for urgent care, and green for the walking wounded. They were then transported to the FCC patient reception area, part of the VA Medical Center portion of the drill, to track them towards hospital care.
Every hospital in Indianapolis is a member of the National Disaster Medical System, so they all have agreed to take patients in the event of a disaster. When a disaster occurs, we call them and say, hey, how many beds do you have available? They might have 15 beds, or they might have only 8 beds or 2 beds. It's whatever they can take at the time that we send patients for.
People on his van, and if you go to the same fence as soon as you get your van loaded up.
An exercise of this magnitude has so many different moving parts, and our moving part was a little overwhelmed.
He's going to St. Vincent?
Yeah, he's going to St. Jim's going.
No, he's going to Methodist. Here's his people.
Where are you supposed to be at? Yellow. So they don't know what you're supposed to be doing?
So nobody's categorized you at all yet. All right, you need to go.
What happened during the exercise was, because of the heat, the exercise was called early.
The next ambulance to load up will just go right there.
And so the patients or the victims that were at the airplane got brought to our area, and they quickly overwhelmed the patient reception team area. And that was a little frustrating, but probably true to life, because it's not going to go in an orderly fashion. And from what I heard and what happened in disasters such as Katrina, that's exactly what happened.
As the event wound down, a critical phase was still to come. The hot wash, as it is called, the immediate feedback mechanism.
As far as what I had to work with, I think it went pretty good.
I think our tables were too close together, so I think that caused a little confusion.
Came off the bus with no triage at all.
The hot wash afterwards showed that we really should have had more personnel on the PRT team to take care of this overwhelming number of patients that came in. But that's what the exercise is all about, is to learn what you need to do and how to improve.
If you actually get through an exercise with no action items or no gaps, you really haven't had a successful exercise. You're really looking to find some gaps, some things that you can do with, fill with training, fill with new resources, fill with new technology. An evaluation form was done so that we could get everyone's feedback on the day of the exercise to make sure that, because people forget things.
There were many key lessons to come out of the training event.
Well, the key things you got to understand, certainly up front, is cooperation and coordination. A single entity trying to do something of this magnitude by themselves, it would just be absurd. You got to work with outside agencies. There were 32 participating agencies in this exercise, but they were all cooperative. We all worked together, and I think we all successfully put on a good event.
Start early. You know, it takes a lot of time to get these things organized. You can't just do something like this in a couple of weeks. If you want to make sure that you've got the objectives out there, you know, keep it realistic when it comes to don't have 15 objectives you're trying to accomplish, because if you do that, you're setting yourself up to fail. There's just no way to get all of these things done, you know, for everyone. It's not cheap. You know, so if you can find funding, if you can find those partnerships and those sponsoring agencies that will help you, that's, you know, more the better, because it's something that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money, unfortunately.
The whole exercise is a no-fault exercise. You don't look for things to blame or look for people to say you didn't do a good job. It's to learn how to improve your plan.
The exercise is truly just the beginning of the process. There will be plenty of follow-ups and after-action items. A plan of continuous improvement that will go on until the next drill.